First of all, I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing funds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got that.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
the
an
Chinese
erratic
Mikhail
detective,
Rodriguez.
is Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? No, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Kingdom, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Good evening to you, wherever you are, based on time zone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. This is a sad program this evening. Sometimes, based on what you are discussing, a program turns out to be a sad program or is discussing a sad event. I don't think Guyana should allow this day, this evening, this night to go unheard, because what has happened on this day many years ago and 1 year ago are two great, well, I withdraw the word great, two tragic events that should remain in the memory of Guyanese. In 1976, a Cubana airline left Guyana and over Barbados in the Caribbean Sea exploded into pieces, killing 73 persons, everyone on board, including the complete fencing team of Cuba. 73 people died, including 5 North Koreans, 11 Guyanese, and the rest were Cubans. It was one of the most terrible terrorist acts in the post-colonial world. That occurred on the 6th of October, 1976. On the 8th of October, 2024, is 1 year since the world has seen the Jewish committal of genocide against another race, the Palestinian race. So one anniversary is on the 6th, one is on the 8th, and this evening, Monday the 7th, we combine the two anniversaries for you to reflect. These are painful moments in the history of civilization, in the history of the Third World, and in particular, Guyana. Here to discuss, reflect, and analyze on those two historical tragedies are people who know what they are talking about. Gerald Perreira was in the executive of the ruling party, the People's National Congress, and traveled 1 week to Cuba after the Cubana air disaster. And maybe he will tell us what was the atmosphere there. Gerald Perreira is a competent Middle East analyst. As I said before, I've known Gerald for more than 50 years, and Gerald can talk about any event in the Middle East. In fact, he lived for a number of years actively in the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't want you don't want any explanation as to this man's capacity to speak on both anniversaries. Our other guest is the former chairman of Region 3 Private Sector Commission, who was on this program before, but he is the chairperson of Guyana-Cuba Solidarity Movement. And each year, his views are solicited on the Cubana air disaster. If you go to the Chronicle last year, you will see his photograph and him speaking about the Cubana disaster. And he travels around the Caribbean at the invitation of Sister Solidarity Movement to speak on this. And Halim Khan is one of the executive members of the Solidarity Committee for Palestine. That committee have held about 6 symposia or 6 national events, and I have spoken at 4 of them. So Halim Khan is also in an intellectual position to analyze the anniversary of genocide. Along with me as co-host is Leonard Craig. If you don't know much about Craig and his intellectual ability, I will briefly tell you this. He has a first degree from the University of Guyana, a master's in economics from the Berlin School of Economics, and was in China completing his PhD at the Harbin Institute of Technology. So I think I can safely say we are in for 1 hour of sound analysis. I will now introduce our guest and my co-host, and then we go alphabetically to Halim Khan. And my first question to him after the introduction is if he had any relatives that was lost in the Caribbean Sea when that airline went down. Halim, thanks for being here once more. I don't know if I should shake Gerald, and Gerald has been here all the time. My co-host, Leonard Craig.
Yeah, brother.
I will start with Halim and then go over to Leonard. Halim, have you lost anyone in the Cubana? Was there any relative who went down? Anybody you knew?
Yes, I should say I lost 11 of my brothers and sisters from Guyana. They are my relative. We are Guyanese. In terms of blood relative, no.
Okay.
Yes. So I would consider my Guyanese counterpart, my Guyanese colleagues who are killed, who are murdered with that terrorist action of certain people who have put that in place for the bomb to explode. I would consider them their family. We are one Guyana, as you would say it now. I should go on further.
Leonard?
All right.
Gerald was in the thick of it in 1976 and went 1 year.
Welcome, gentlemen.
1 month after.
1976. Now, let's deal with the Palestinian issue to begin with. The attack on Israel. I've listened to several interviews, Al Jazeera and several other places where people have justified that attack. And they give reasons. How do you contextualize the Hamas attack on Israel on the 8th of
7th of October. Israel went into Gaza on the 8th.
Right, yes. How do you contextualize that?
Well, first of all, of course, the context is important. The mainstream media, the corporate media keep telling you about Hamas and Hamas. Hamas had the largest contingent of fighters when that attack was launched. There were 5 other groups that participated with Hamas, including Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, that you remember Laila Khalid that hijacked a plane many years ago. She became very well, famous, and she's a member of the Palestinian parliament, and that was founded by Dr. George Habash, that emerged out of the earlier Arab nationalist movement. Then there was another group, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and you have the Mujahideen brigades. There were 6 groups. Some of those groups that I mentioned, 2 of them are Marxist-Leninist in orientation. So this is not some sort of how the West and Netanyahu is trying to frame it like it's a religious war with Muslims versus Jews. That is not it. Because there are many Jews who reject the state of Israel, that the state of Israel is not a geographical and political entity. It's a spiritual entity, and according to Jewish scriptures, only the Messiah, and they don't see Jesus as the Messiah. We need to understand that can reestablish the state of Israel. And you have Jews who belong to the Neturei Karta group. They protest against the Jewish state, the state of Israel. They're anti-Zionists. So is the attack on Israel legitimate? Yes, it is. It is a resistance struggle. Those who condemn the Hamas attack need to take into account that you had in the United States those who fought African enslavement, Denmark Vesey, and others, like Nat Turner, who broke out of their barracks at night, and even in the Caribbean, who broke out of the barracks and burned the plantation and attacked the house of the master, the slave master. So you cannot condemn Hamas for doing that unless you understand what took place in history, because Gaza is a big concentration camp. You can't have people, although that amount of people, locked into that enclave.
More than 2 million.
Yes, and then over the fence, you have so-called Jews, 50 nationalities, as Netanyahu pointed out, from Canada, Britain, the United States, all over, that are citizens of those countries who come down and they're having a party over the fence. And the enslaved are watching on. And those settlers, many of those settlers, and the corporate media, the Western media, they never highlight this. Many of those settlers, those Jewish settlers, Zionist settlers, used to cross over and kill Palestinians and go back. This is well documented. So Hamas is a legitimate, I am more ideologically, I might be closer, although I'm not a Marxist, but I can acknowledge the strength that Karl Marx made and Marxism made to analyzing human society. You know, we have some people who come on Freddie Kissoon Show and they use Marxist categories and they like to quote Marx, but they don't mention Marx's name, right? So my point is that I am more, if I have my sympathies, it's more to like the Mujahideen brigades and people like the Popular Front and so. But that is secondary. This is a legitimate resistance movement.
So, in your opinion, labeling Hamas as a terrorist organization is a misplaced title?
Of course, it's ridiculous.
Mr. Khan, you share any opinion close to that?
Yes. October the 7th is not when it all started.
That's right.
76 years ago, our women, our children, been crying for help, and yet the world turned a blind eye. If you're gonna come to my country, to my house, and throw with the army and throw everything out on the street, and for a generation you season our land, our homes, every single thing which we own, those children, small children growing up and knowing that they're gonna resist. There's only so much they're gonna take. But according to international law, you have no government or people have the right to conquer, nor to annex or seize a next person's territory, a next country. I must use it that way, because we consider that there were no Israel before 1948. There were only Palestine. But the Palestinians sorry for them and bring them into the land. But they have a demarcation. That is why you have now Occupy West Bank, settlements. How can you come to my land, or any one of us here, you could come to my home and say, I'm a settler, so I'm going to take something. You're a thief, man. You're not a settler.
Can you expand on when the term that you use, the Palestinians brought them and allowed them? Expand on that. What you
now,
refer?
We all know that what's been happening to the Jews in Europe.
The viewers might not.
Yes, right. So the Jews the Jews, they have faced prosecution and so on during World War II and so on, put in many punishment they went through. So they had wanted a land where they could settle. And Guyana is one of the land they was looking at. The British was looking at Guyana to bring the Jews here to settle here in Guyana.
God help us if here.
Or else we would be the same thing. We would have to look at Freddie's phone, make sure that it's not getting hot on him. Here, or else.
They probably would have expelled this to Barbados or one of those Caribbean islands, right?
Yes. So
seriously, do you think they would have done that? Push us out of Caribbean island because of the common culture? Anyway, yes, Adam, sorry about that.
Yes, so with the culture that they have, and then it shows a superiority with colors, if you look at it. Because if you look at what will be happening to the Jews, they look at Guyana, to bring them here in Guyana, this would have been the promised land for them, with the British rule then. Now, the request from Palestine to take them in there, the Palestinians welcome them with open arms, hug them as a brother, according to the scriptures. Hug them as a brother. These are Jewish brothers and sisters. Let's accept them here. But in terms of what they do, they use that advantage on the Palestinians.
Okay, Mr. Khan, I get what you're saying, but I want to ask you this question from a geopolitical perspective. And do you think that the movements, whether Zionists or the political powers that be in Israel, do you believe that it is an organic thing? Or do you believe it is geopolitical powers at play that created the situation that we're in with respect to Israel, Palestine, Gaza, so on?
First of all, we have to look at how the Jews come to Palestine. As I mentioned before, that Guyana was one of the country they was looking at to bring the Jews to Guyana to resettle them here. And Palestine is not no promised land for the Zionists or the Jews, but it's a land which the British, when Britain looked to take them, to let them to resettle in that area, because what will be happening in World War II with the torture and the murder, the genocide which will be taking care of them, which will be happening with them. But does not mean because your generation or your family passed through something mean that you could implement the same thing on a next nation. So the British was the one, when you look at political way, Britain was one of the country who actually bring them there to resettle and make a demarcation that this would be Israel. So that's how it all started. And then we know about the war in 1948, where it was involved with many other Arab countries too. But they continue to arm the Zionists. The West continue to arm the Zionists, whereas the United States, the British, they continue to arm them. And anyone can go who have a US passport or Canadian passport or British passport to that country and resettle. And they could settle on Palestinian land. If someone come to your land or your home and put you out from your home with the police and the army behind it with guns, and you are helpless and you cannot do anything, and the only place where you're left is on the street. After a little while, you would have a resistance. As I mentioned before, that anyone who no government or people have the right to conquer, because you're going to face resistance after a little while. And that is not just a piece of land it took from them. The entire crops of agriculture which they depend on, and you put them out of the house, nowhere to go besides on the street. And yet you cannot do anything about it. So it did not come just like that, but politics was involved in it. Because if you check on the United States, their election is all based on support from Israel.
Mr. Perreira, the geopolitical question.
Well, there are some things that we need to correct. First of all, there were Jews in Palestine before the European Jews came there, and they coexisted peacefully.
Yes.
Since the days, if you read, it goes back since the days, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, 7th century Arabia, they were there, the Sephardic Jews, who are more dark-skinned Jews, and they're discriminated against by these Ashkenazi or European Jews. Those are the Jews who were brought from Europe and imposed there, that the Western powers brought. The other thing is, the persecution of the Jews did not begin with Hitler. In fact, Hitler found fertile ground. So when he tossed the seeds, it was able to sprout. I mean, anti-Semitism was there. What you call anti-Semitism, it was there. You only have to go and read the writings of Martin Luther, one of the leaders of the Protestant Reformation, and you will hear what he said about Jews. Do you know Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice, is not in certain schools in the United States is prohibited? It is seen as an anti-Semitic text. Yeah. So if you go right back, I think it was King Henry VI, from the house, one of the Tudor houses, the House of Tudor, who brought in a law that Jews must walk around with a tag identifying themselves. And then he issued a decree saying that they should get out of England a certain time. And he gave them, I think it was up to the day you call Valentine's Day. Then you look at, go to Spain. When the two crowns of Castile and Aragon were united under Isabel and Ferdinand, who sponsored Columbus' so-called voyage of discovery. The Moors who were from North Africa, Muslims, primarily Africans, and they had Arabs enlisted in the army. They were in Spain for more than 500 years. And in the final battle, when the two crowns were united, the Moors were driven out. The Moors, when they were leaving, going back to North Africa, the Jews went to them and said, take us with you, because we will be persecuted by the Catholics. And they went. So there was no, and under the Moorish Muslim rule in Spain, Jews were protected. So when the Moors were leaving, the Jews said, we don't want to stay in Europe. And Isabel and Ferdinand told the Jews, you either convert to Catholicism or we will deal with you.
We'll come back.
So I'm showing you this thing about Hitler started this thing. It's not true. There's a European
he inherited
it was there.
Anti-Jewish. We're going to swing back to the cruelty of the Israeli Defense Force and the government, a cruelty that perhaps exceeds what the Nazis did to the Jews. But let's look at 1976. Gerald, you knew anyone who got killed, and any of the Guyanese scholarship holders who got killed?
No, I know Jeffrey Thomas, Minister Jeffrey Thomas, who was once the chairman of the Young Socialist Movement. Yeah. And he was Minister of Home Affairs, Education before Health, Housing and Labor. He lost a brother on that flight, Raul Thomas. He was going to study medicine.
Yeah, Jeffrey Thomas, a famous.
Yeah, he was going to study medicine. And I remember a Korean diplomat by the name of Oh Ki-bong.
He got killed.
He died on it, yes.
I want both of you to look back. that was
because on the next flight we went to Cuba 1 week after.
same Cubana.
Yes, Cubana, with a delegation. No, it was a delegation headed by the late Oscar Clark, and you had Joshua Chorit Mutu, who was a regional minister. You had this woman, Ormia Johnson, who was from their PNC, and there was a guy.
Women Auxiliary.
The Women Auxiliary. There was one Rafik Mirza, who was a local authority from the local authority body. And Harun Rashid, who was in Bornham's office as a political assistant. There was a trade unionist by the name of Alvin Sinclair from the General Workers
I know
Union.
Mr. Sinclair. He lived next to me in Dublin Street.
Yeah, then there was a man called Arthur Tom, who was from, I think, the Prime Minister's
So that was the
office.
delegation that went to
Yes,
Cuba.
yes. 1 week after that bombing.
But what I want to ask both of you is that was one of the most terrible terrorist acts that the Third World or the experience. But most of all, the Caribbean saw nothing like that. And these guys worked for the CIA, and one of them who was wanted in Venezuela for murdering 73 persons went to the United States, and guess what he was charged for? Entering the US illegally. And I think after 19 weeks or 19 days, United States is still looking for people that committed acts under the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And the People's Palestine Liberation Organization. They're still looking for any of those persons who are still alive. In the 70s, they said one of them is in Beirut. But the United States was not interested in...
No, but the US, Leonard raised something earlier about if Hamas is terrorist. The United States and the Western countries listed every liberation movement
as terrorists.
Mandela's ANC was listed as terrorists
by America.
By the West. When Mandela, when there was this thing about, when there was the whole the thing about freeing Nelson Mandela. Margaret Thatcher said Nelson Mandela is a terrorist and he should remain in prison where he deserves to be and rot. She said that. But get back to this. But the US,
the Western people who fighting in Ukraine are not terrorists. They have British and American.
But not only that. Not only that, Freddie. This is what is interesting. Do you know there is a convergence of neo-Nazis, pseudo-Islamist groups, right? Pseudo-Islamist groups fighting not only in the Ukraine, but in the Sahel countries. In the Sahel, do you know that the group that bombed the theater in Russia came out of Syria, that they're ISIL people because they want to get back at the Russians because it was the Russians who bombed the hell out of them in Syria and allowed the Hezbollah fighters from Lebanon and the Popular Mobilization Brigade, because there's also a Hezbollah group in Iraq called Katib Hezbollah. They have about 30,000 fighters. They're part of what you call the Popular Mobilization Brigade. They were the people who drove ISIL out. They drove out ISIL.
The Cuban thing, Halim, there is you're chairman of the Cuba Girl. Is there any fundraising activity over the past 10 years to put a monument in a popular spot in Guyana for these people?
The university government, the government have put a monument there at the university, the UG there, with the names of all the boys.
It's not so public.
But the students don't even know anything.
A majority of people in Guyana don't go to the university.
We was looking a few years ago to put one in Main Street.
Right. Where the Guyanese
was
people...
there an attempt to put one by camp next to GTI, that space there?
Yes.
What happened with that?
Yes, the permission,
I think there was an attempt. I don't know if you could recall. What happened with that? Do you know? What was your group?
Yes, but that was the original place to put it first. Then they moved to the UG and said, well, listen,
it is the same monument that was moved to UG.
Yes.
Oh.
You see, when you have a monument in a place like UG. Remember, UG is just a small percentage of the Guyanese population. People whose children are not going to UG, people who are not interested in driving into UG would not see that monument. But I was wondering if any attempt was made to ask the Cuban government to, well, not finance, but to assist with architect and materials to put the monument some way it could, where it could go now is where the First Lady landscaped the seawall from Kingston right down to the bandstand. It could get, look, I'm there, I tell you, lots of people visit that site every month.
I don't know the reason for them putting it on the Torcan campus. I don't know, but Barbados keeps this October the 6th.
Yeah, because
alive.
The flight stopped in Barbados.
Yeah.
And when it left, then right.
But the documents are there. The men who planted the bomb, the hotel that they went to, his name, the first phone call they made was made to the US Embassy. Then they left the embassy and went back to the hotel, shifted from the hotel and went to another hotel. Ralph Gonzalez read the entire thing out at the forum at UWI. Everything is there, you know. But it shows, Freddie, the hypocrisy and double standards of the West. The West supports terrorist groups. They supported terrorist outfits for years. The United States supported terrorist groups like UNITA against the Angolan government, never give them a breathing space. They support terrorist outfits and fascist outfits to remove...
Jonas Savimbi, the head of
Jonas Savimbi
wasn't found to be on the CIA payroll.
Yes, he was. He was. But this is what's interesting. Do you know, you would have read, because you did a lot of reading on the German history, so you remember the infamous butcher of Lyon, Klaus Barbie. Klaus Barbie
ran away to Argentina.
Yeah, Bolivia,
yeah.
Klaus Barbie was a member of Hitler's SS. And he was responsible for overseeing the murder of many Jews. At the end of the Second World War, the Americans moved him to Bolivia. And France was looking for him. And when France did get wink that he was in Bolivia.
Certain CIA release documents, I don't think the CIA is going to ever release those documents, but what I find hard to take about the 1976 Cubana is that US had intelligence data that this thing was being planned.
That is being planned.
No soldier was killed in that flight. No. It was just...
Were there Bajans on the flight?
No Bajans was on the flight. Because
North Korean, Guyanese, and Cubans.
They hit
5 North Korean.
You hit 3 countries, right? That were which was Cuba, Guyana, and North Korea, DPRK.
Yeah, but what I can't understand, why did the flight in transit Barbados?
It stopped in Trinidad first, I think. It stopped in Trinidad.
Yes.
It stopped in
to
Trinidad.
Pick up whom? There were no Trinis, there were no Bajans.
No, I think those flights used
that was just a standard leg.
Standard leg, yeah.
And Jamaica was the next stop.
And
Jamaica was the final stop.
Yeah, because if you're going to Cuba, that's how they used to. The Air Cubana used to go to Jamaica and then on, right? So they protected Klaus Barbie, and when France requested they hand it over, the U.S. ambassador refused.
Anyway, before I had
so it's nothing new.
Before I had back to Leno, the Israelis are now in Lebanon, but I think it's a different prospect. They went into Hamas, and the fighting took a long time. In Lebanon, one day after, they lost 8 soldiers.
They lost more than 8. You see, the Israelis are good at lying.
I should
you
not say
mentioned that, and you're right. In that article, they're good at that. My daughter just got out on a flight today, an emergency flight.
From Lebanon?
From Lebanon. So she was witnessing everything from the distance, the explosions and all of that. And she just got out on a flight that is heading to Turkey.
Yeah.
Right? But Hezbollah is a much more larger and formidable force.
Than Hamas.
Formidable. You know, Hezbollah played a very significant role in defeating ISIS, these terrorist groups, in Syria and in Iraq. But you know what's interesting, Freddie, that nobody pays attention to? Have you noticed, I think I raised this with you before, that since this fighting is going on between Hamas and the Zionists and Hezbollah, the Zionists, where is Al-Qaeda? Where is ISIL? Have you heard from them? They haven't touched. You don't find it interesting? They haven't touched not one ISIL. Most of ISIL victims, 95% were Muslims, Yazidis, and Christians.
So you say
neither Al-Qaeda or ISIL has attacked any Zionist target. No, because they're working in the interest of the Western intelligence services.
I always thought about that. They bomb hotels in Kenya, bomb hotels in Somalia, but they never attack any
no, they don't. They don't. What's interesting is look at the alliance of Sahel states. They call ISIL the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service, ISIS. Look at what's going on in the Sahel countries of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Since they decided to kick out France, take control of the resources and call for the bases, suddenly there's an escalation. Malian troops have been ambushed by a group in Mali that is affiliated to Al-Qaeda. And guess who provided intelligence to them and came out openly and said we're helping them? The Ukrainian intelligence service. All because the Russians now, those countries brought in the Russians.
Either Mali or Niger did. They told the Americans don't want to leave the air base.
Yeah, so they brought the
Russians and the Russians are there. But Leonard?
Okay, so let me give you my perspective on everything, and I am not as involved in the histological development of the Hamas-Israeli thing. So my view might be a little more tame than more modern. And this is what I felt, and I do feel, that Hamas and other groups came over the border and killed and kidnapped people. And I see that as being wrong, whichever way you look at it. And I believe that Israel had a right to defend itself. That just going with my own thing. But Israel, in defending itself, I think they have gone to some excesses that I myself did not expect. How do you contextualize that view?
Well, first of all, I don't agree with you that about, as Halim pointed out, this thing did not begin on October the 7th. It did not begin. This, for years, the Israelis have been taken out. You can't tell me when I should attack and when I should not attack. The Israelis have been, look at what, Sheikh Yassin, who is a crippled in a wheelchair, was taken out by an Israeli zone and killed.
Okay, listen. So no, what I'm getting from you, before you continue, what I'm getting from you is that you are justifying the killing and the taking of hostages on the 7th. Is it you're justifying it?
Let me tell you something. No wars.
So you're accepting it was a declaration of war?
No.
Okay.
The declaration of war did not begin on the 7th. It's been going on for decades.
So for the conflict, you're referring to the entire
yes. There's a lot. The Deir Yassin massacre, the massacre at Sabran Shatila, and many more. The Israelis been assassinating people, taking out people with drones
For
decades. You can't tell me when I am saying this, and I say it without any apologies. I believe that what Hamas did is legitimate, and they had a moral right to go in there. Those people, but there's not an army. Those people who were taken, listen, those people who were taken as hostages, not one, this is another lie, nobody was raped. Nobody was, their head was taken off. That is a lot of...
Yeah, I think that is established now.
It's well known.
It's,
and the Western media went with
New
that.
York Times ran with that fiction.
That's right.
From a source.
The Islamic, there is guidelines for any Islamic group waging war, even the so-called secular groups go by those.
But the Iranians have not killed any civilians in that bombing. You know?
The Israelis are deliberately bombing civilian targets.
Yeah.
So
it's a terrorist state. It's a terrorist state.
175 journalists have been killed. Never in the history of the United Nations so many UN workers.
In the war, in any war. But Halim, you want to come in?
Yes, I look at October the 7th as a stage and well organized with designers, with that group who went in there. And then you have the best of intelligence, you selling intelligence to other countries, and yet your fence, somebody cut your fence and come in. The specific place where you organize also, and I'm going to mention that in London, I can't remember the year. Jerry, you could help me out with this. I can't remember. There was someone for the M16 or M15. They claimed that the Israeli bombed 2 of their own citizens in a hotel and blamed the Palestinian. I can't remember her name who bring out that at that time when she was stationed in London. So October the 7th, this here, I think, and I feel strongly that the Israelis set up this here to get a war, because 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior to this October the 7th, Netanyahu, or I must say Netanyahu, he had a map showing that there would be a canal was through the Gaza area and a road run through there. So everyone was wanting to know, how come you have a map and this have materialized? These are Palestinian land. So that was 3 weeks before the Ben Gurion canal. So, and they wanted, this whole thing was a setup, I would see.
If I label what you're saying as conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy.
How you feel? You feel what you're saying there is fact, or is it closer to conspiracy theory?
I would say conspiracy, because the reason why, you have the best gunship, you sell it to other countries, and Hamas, or I must say the resistant fighters, did not kill all those people. It's a helicopter gunship. I
think there's a middle way here.
Yes.
I don't think the Israeli staged that thing just to create a war.
Yeah, correct.
I believe Hamas was so angry at what they were seeing over the fence.
That's right.
And they plot this thing. But I believe when the thing unfolded and transmissions were made to the intelligence agencies in Israel, and then they set out to visit the site, I think they killed people by mistake.
Yeah.
I think they kill a lot of Jewish people by mistake. The trouble we have in this world is that those things are not given global coverage.
Correct, they're not. No, I disagree with Halim.
The Israelis
he accepted that it's conspiracy theory. So whether you agree or not, right?
Well, I heard a senior member of the PPP said that Hamas was once a member of the PLO. Hamas was never a member of PLO. They were never members of the PLO. And I read an article by Mr. Ram Karan, and he came somewhere along the line that the Israelis had encouraged the growth and development of Hamas. And that's not true. There's an excellent book, you should get it. It's called Hamas, The Unwritten Papers by Azam Tamimi. It's an excellent book from inside. And there's another good one by Hezbollah, by Naim Qasim, who is the Deputy General Secretary of Hezbollah. What happened was, you see, Freddie and Leonard, the Hamas emerged out of a split in the Jordanian Ikhwan al-Muslimin, Muslim Brotherhood, because the Ikhwan al-Muslimin were very reformist. You know, they cozy up to the Jordanian regime and to the Arabs and so for financial support. So the early group led by Sheikh Yassin broke away from them. So in the initial stages, they were doing a lot of charitable work, because that's what the Ikhwan was famous for when it was founded in Egypt by Hassan al-Banna, until when Nasser carried out the revolution, deposed the king, and then later on nationalized the Suez Canal. In the early phases, they supported Nasser. Then they attempted an assassination of Nasser. What I'm saying is this, because they broke with the thing, because they saw them as too reformist and they needed to take action. So Israel turned a blind eye because they were doing welfare work.
One of the things I want to ask you, the bombing took place in 1976, and Burnham was Burnham was incensed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the whole world was incensed.
And Burnham called names.
But Burnham stayed into power until 1985. Why didn't he? Could you explain why he didn't try to put a monument or something somewhere? 76 to 85 is a long time. It's 9 years.
I am not. I can't recall, I'm not sure, but I know that Burnham mentioned the names of those people who were protected by the United States government.
Yes.
Bosch and Posadas
Bosch,
and Freddie Lugo, those who planted the bomb, were imprisoned in Venezuela, and a few months after they got away from a maximum security prison.
Freddie Lugo, they were held up, they were free, they were living openly in Florida.
But Freddie, you need to go. There's an excellent book, Rogue State USA. It's a book, Rogue State, about the world's only superpower, the United States, by William Blum. And he documents all of these things.
I think the US. Before you come in, isn't there a monument in Barbados?
Yes,
that overlooks the.
Yes, there is a monument. I spoke there.
You spoke at the meeting
about 4 years ago.
Okay, Leonard.
Yeah. Where we did touch on a monument earlier at UG and so on.
But that monument at UG is not very prominent, you know.
No,
it's if you drive in or you're going to UG, it's not. It should have been when you drive into UG, right by the play field there. Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Don't you think, based on your activism and involvement in organizations, for example, yourself, Guyana, Cuba, Solidarity Movement.
He's the chairman of that. So.
Right. Don't you think that you should be organizing programs to bring this thing more to the knowledge of younger people? People from their 40s coming down might not even have heard about this. And let's agitate for a monument in a prominent place in the city or somewhere. So that people can remember that our countrymen died in a major terrorist attack.
He has some serious contacts.
Guyana was that terrorist attack, as they may call it, Cubana air disaster. It's not no Cubana air disaster. It's not a disaster, just like that. Yeah. It's a terrorist act. I was used that as a terrorist act. And least we forgot that this was the first terrorist act
in the Caribbean,
and on Guyana, on Guyanese. So all time we must condemn that, but we never hear the other part from the West condemn that terrorist act, where they supported this guy who lived in Miami for the longest while.
I want to ask a leading question. Do you think we can safely say the monument at UG is in obscurity? There's a monument, but it's obscured. Do you think there is anything political about that? Were the people who died deeply politically involved or anything? Is there a political shade to it? It's a leading question, so
no.
You can...
That monument there, whosoever changed that location from Camp Street, Camp on Lamar Street, there in the open piece there, maybe they look at it at a different perspective, to look at it that this is students who are involved who get killed, and the best place to put it is there. It is in there. But I was objecting to that.
You were?
Yes.
Why?
Because that's not the right location. You need people to see the terrorist act which had been committed on 11 Guyanese, and also let's not forget all
I
the
think
other
I
Cubans
saw the
as well.
design for that. It had an airplane. And,
yes, there was something supposed to be put
wouldn't
there.
that be prominent?
That would be the best place to put it.
Oh, so when you said you did not agree to which place you're referring to?
No, for the UG.
Oh, you didn't agree to UG.
Right, the UG. And this was the ideal spot for it, for people to look at it at that level.
But can you approach the president now?
But they would have...
How much would that cost? Anybody have a figure?
What we can request, because since that is a forced terrorist attack on Guyanese...
So 9/11.
Yes. So the best place to put it is around where people can see it. Not how many parts.
I think that seawall place.
How many?
But don't forget the 1823 monument.
Yes.
You go on a Sunday night.
Yeah, lots
where
of
the 1823 monument there.
Yes. But
it's thousands of people every month visit this seawall from the roundabout to Kingston. If there's any place you're going to put any monument, but the operator signal that we have 6 minutes left.
I agree with I agree with Leonard. You can't erase it from history, but I think the whole thing about placing it up at UG is just to make it somehow insignificant. And the people who go there to talk, they talk about terrorism, but they don't identify the players. And this is where it comes to now. What we're seeing where the world is today, the world cannot carry on the way it is, and it is changing. It is changing, and I believe that we are living in the century where we're going to see the collapse of Western civilization in Empire. I honestly believe that. And you know why it's going to collapse? Because the Western civilization is tied to a system that was built on the genocide of indigenous people and the trade in captured Africans. It is bankrupt and it's going down. And what you're seeing is the hypocrisy of the United States. I heard the US ambassador to Guyana telling the president that the US is going to stand up to any bully and defend Guyana. The United States is a bully. Look at what the US did. The entire world voted for the illegal and immoral sanctions on Cuba to be lifted. Only 2 countries, 1 abstention, the Ukraine. The entire world voted in favor for it to be lifted, except the United States and Israel. And you have Cuba on a list of countries that sponsor terrorism. Name me 1 act of terrorism that Cuba sponsored.
Before Leonard come here, I want to tell Archie you something. When I saw this thing, do you know, you wouldn't believe it, do you know there was a resolution asking Israeli, deeming the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land illegal and seeking the removal. And strange enough, Ukraine abstained. It was a very, very surprising thing because Ukraine saying Russia occupying we territory.
And Ukraine abstained.
How we could support Israel occupying? Ukraine abstained.
Yeah, they abstained.
So, if we look at the map of Israel, or how Israel is located, almost every other neighbor of Israel are enemies of the West, quote unquote.
Like, name the countries, which almost? Which countries? Saudi Arabia.
Jordan, Saudi Arabia.
They're allies, they're
Egypt.
friends. Egypt, all of them are allies in the West. That's not true.
No, not at all times.
No,
and
that's true.
Not throughout history.
The only time Egypt had an anti-imperialist line against the West, and so it was under Nasser. Sadat came in and right through Egypt. You got Jordan.
But do you realize?
Jordan is helping.
No, but I think you guys.
No, you're looking. No. I am talking about the physical map, right? You are looking at the side of North Africa, right? I am not talking about the side of North Africa. I'm talking about the Asian side.
No, what do you call? People call it Middle East, but you call
or Middle East.
But I think when you mean enemies of the West,
but Saudi
you have
Arabia
to
is not
separate
an
the
enemy.
people from the government.
Right.
All of those Arab governments are pro-Western. In fact, have
Saudi Arabia
have intelligence relationship
with the West.
With the West. I think the people, the Arab people, don't like what the West is doing to them and to the world.
That's right.
But they can't stop it. Egypt. Do you know the president of Egypt came to power through a coup that Obama supported?
Supported, yeah. Well, that's when the
United States, Obama got the Nobel Peace thing.
When the results of certain elections come out and the US, it doesn't suit the US, they go against it. They go against it.
Halim wants to say something.
And then all the goods, which was interrupt by the ships and which was interrupt, is moving by land through Saudi Arabia, Jordan,
because
Egypt, and head trading because
the Houthis are attacking. The Houthis are doing the right thing.
Jordan played a part when the first Iranian attacked. German played a part in stopping the missiles.
So you are making part of the point I wanted to raise here. Putin invaded
Crimea. The Ukraine.
Ukraine, no. For one reason, he said the West is expanding, right? Well, just that's one of the reasons. It's a similar thing. Israel is there to expand the interest of the West. And the point I'm coming to, do you think that interest that Israel is carrying out might not be their own interest? Because I think a survey was taken the other day. I can't remember the name exactly, but most of the Israeli people in Israel want Netanyahu out. That's one. And they do not want this war that is going on now to continue. So, do you believe that is Israel's war?
The operator signal time is up.
Yeah. Israel
just answer the question.
Israel is an outpost of Western imperialism.
All right.
That's what it is.
Halim?
A dog in the heart of the Arab world.
So the United States, they arm the Ukrainians with everything they have to fight Russia. The life of the Palestinian is just, if you cut them, you'll find the same blood as the Ukrainian. So they should have the same treatment to the United States should be arming the Palestinian.
We gotta go. We gotta go. Time has just run out on us. Thanks for being with us. This is the anniversary of the terrorist attack on the Cubana airline in 1976 that took the lives of 7 Guyanese, 4 North Koreans, and of the 73 people, the rest were Cubans, including the entire fencing team of Cuba. This evening marks the anniversary of the first terrorist act against Guyana and the Caribbean people. The 8th of October marks the anniversary of the beginning of Jewish genocide against the Palestinian people. We were looking at those 2 anniversaries. Our guest was Halim Khan, president of the Guyana-Cuba Solidarity Movement and one of the organizers of Solidarity for Palestine Committee in Guyana. Our other guest was Gerald Perreira, who at the time of the Cubana terrorist act was part of the ruling party and traveled to Cuba 1 week after. My co-host was Leonard Craig, and you will see Craig in the seat in many more editions of the Freddie Kissoon Show. Thanks for being with us. As I said from the beginning of the show, this is indeed a very sad edition of the Freddie Kissoon Show. Very, very sad indeed. There is genocide going on in Gaza as we sit in the comfort of our Queenstown studio. We will see you on Friday for our next edition. Catch you later.